Busy time for not just the legislature, but especially for you folks in the Senate Appropriations Committee. I guess it's time for what's referred to as markups on that budget.
That starts very shortly. As a lot of people will hear this, it's probably already started. It's going to be interesting this year, so interesting every year, but this year in particular, we're kind of dragging our feet just a little bit. Our revenue consensus is not being met, and actually we're down about $250 million of what we were last year. We think this will turn around because of the new federal tax laws, and then the Department of Revenue, which that person has now resigned, was putting out some false information about deductions from employers that should be taken. They weren't. So some people are getting really surprised notices that they have to pay revenue in when they're used to getting a refund. And their actually taxes are probably less, but the withholding wasn't done properly. Not the fault of the employer or anybody else, it's the fault of the Department of Revenue. Puts us still down about $550 to $600 million short over this year's projected budget. So it's a little hard to spend next year's money, which will start July 1st, when we don't even know what's coming in this year. So dragging our feet a little bit, trying to get some better estimates, and that should help after April 15th, of course. We have to have this done by the first part of May to the governor by that time, but we will get it done, and we'll just kind of see where it all goes.
Does that impact in terms of, granted, like you mentioned, the money itself has an obvious impact. Does the Department of Revenue, is that going to come into focus with appropriations and the budget in the coming, I guess, now days?
I think so, because we rely on them for information about where we're standing. I mean, I get a report, get them more often, at least every month, where Department of Revenue is at on income from taxes, whether it be corporate taxes or individual or sales tax, whatever. We constantly get reports and pay attention to them to where we're at. And we're dealing with possibly up to $30 billion this year. Lots of pocket change there.
We've seen, fortunately not so much in your district, but to the north, even in the central part of the state, we're seeing the continued flooding the last almost month now.
It is, and the governor's been really on top of this. Lieutenant Governor's going to be up there this weekend and we'll survey a lot of it. We all know what that's like because the way our district, our hometowns flood down in our area. And of course, we had some real disasters a couple times and a couple years ago. So it's a concern of everybody up here. I'm the 33rd state senator, the 33rd district, but still I do represent the state of Missouri. And being compassionate people, I'm sure that we as a state will do all we can to assist the federal government in whatever they do.
This week we saw some, and we saw some in the last couple of weeks too, but the consent bills that have been going through the body.
Consent bills come, they can be House or Senate, but they have no revenue, so that there's no plus or minus any revenue in there, and no penalty. So it's a way of fast-tracking bills that don't have major consequences in revenue or in penalty, or any consequence of revenue and penalty. So it's a good place to get stuff done, clearing up paperwork, defining regulations or cutting regulations. So it's good. I've had 3 of them this year, I think, and they're all already out of the Senate over at the House, and some from the House coming over here. It's a good thing to get out of the way before we get into the real meat of the session, which is coming. This week we did do some consent bills here till 1 in the morning one night on charter schools, which is definitely controversial. Neither side wants to budge until there's some concessions on one side or the other. I do not expect any movement in it and haven't seen any people willing to make concessions. And that's a bigger issue for the metropolitan areas, but it still can affect our local areas. So that's to be determined at this point.
The gubernatorial appointments continue. We had a few of them this week as well.
Right. Last week we had 2 residents from West Plains up, Dr. Scott Reams, optometrist, and then Mary Shedd for the State Board of Education, which is K through 12, which is an incredibly important position. And so the Senate confirmed them. So they now have that official position. I really appreciate their willingness to serve. Credible amount of time. Most boards do not pay anything, but they require an awful amount of time. Meeting up here in Jeff City, they do get a little bit of mileage money, but that's it. But the dedication of citizens willing to serve is really important. Anybody interested in serving on some, need to see what boards are open for the state of Missouri. Go to the governor's website and it can tell you. You make application online to the governor, and at that point, let us know if you've made an application. We can then see what we can do, but the governor makes the appointments. We don't. We confirm them, but we don't actually make the appointments. But these are 2 really good people, and I'm very proud of the people we've got on from our area on the state boards, some really important positions. And all of them are important, whether it be child advocacy or State Board of Education. We have a commissioner on the Highway Department, which is definitely helping our area. We have someone on the Board of Governors, plus a lot of other appointments. So we've done really well in our area as far as appointments. And it's good that the governor sees our need and gets really good dedicated people that have common sense plus some intelligence to back up that common sense.